Welcome, bienvenue, welcome once again to another Property Quorum. As usual, I'm having the stage in the studio. Hamish McLay of Search Convey, Juliet Baboolal, and of course Chris Gilsenan, fresh from his travels and from route home. And we're also joined today by a special guest, which I will just bring on with us, who's Simon Pollins. Thank you very much for taking time out.
Morning.
So, as usual, we are here to discuss ideas and concepts that are currently affecting the property market and the people within it. And today's topic is no exception. Are you looking to get true value? Then think about getting savvy about navigating the property market. Can you make professional charges work to your advantage? Hamish, let me throw you under the bus. Professional charges?
It sort of takes me back a little bit. I won't tell you how many years, to Hyde Park in London. And there was a band performing on stage. And there was a guy called Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones screaming at the top of his voice, "You can't always get what you want." I'd sing it to you, but I don't have the voice for it. But it does remind me sort of so much that so often we don't get what we want. But all too often, we get what we pay for. And it's so very, very easy to think, let's get something on Amazon. Let's go for and you get the cheapest. And sometimes it works for you. But we're not speaking about Amazon. We're speaking about property. And there's so many sort of wonderful quote tools we have about these days, which sadly, they don't get what you're actually wanting anyway. A quote will never actually do that because you're different, your property is different. So until somebody finds out what you truly want, they can't actually give you. And you're only going to get value when you tell somebody what you actually want and they get it for you. And that's when you should truly get value.
Chris, can you get what you want?
I'm very much a proponent of the principle of you pay cheap, you buy cheap, you buy twice, basically. Yeah, and I'm probably the worst person to ask because I seem to learn by the school of hard knocks, so I do it to myself all the time. So I've gone through the mill more than once and experienced that. Yeah, you really do, like Hamish says, you get what you pay for. And this is not really the industry to be testing that one in because it can get very expensive.
Well, yes. But you've learned a lot of lessons. I mean, Chris and I do a lot of podcasting together ourselves, and Chris literally went through from the ground upwards. So you kind of seen it. Now, would you say
when you're first starting out as an investor, you do try and penny pinch, shall we say? Not cut corners, penny pinch. You do try and do stuff. You try and take on as much as you can yourself to minimize the costs because you don't necessarily have a budget or have a focus on how to even set a budget or what a budget should look like on a property project. So yeah, I appreciate it. Some people who start out, they want to do everything themselves or as much as they can themselves to try and minimize their costs going in. It takes a little bit of time and experience to reframe that thinking to actually turn it around and think, well, what are the costs of everything? How do I then cover those costs? And then go in with your eyes wide open to what to expect.
But are people going into this with their eyes wide open, Juliet?
Do you know, it goes back to the old adage, you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. And that's the key thing, getting bitten because you've gone down a path because you don't know what the ramifications are. You don't know what sort of questions you should be asking. I'll give you an example. You've got a developer, Chris, you're doing a project, you've gone to an architect and you've got a quotation, but you forgot to ask the architect for the copyright in the plans to the planning permission. A rogue architect is going to charge you twice. He's going to charge you for the copyright when in fact, those plans are only applicable to that project. So it's no use to him anyways. You know, so the reality of, if you've asked your questions beforehand, you could negotiate a price and say, look, I expect this, this, and this. These are the scope of works. These are the costs. And, you know, often people will come to me and say, so what can you do for me? What, you know, can you do it at a fixed price, etc.? And I often say, based on what you've given me, this is what I propose, but that's subject to change. And that's ultimately what one should have in one's mind, that if there's additional complexities, etc., there will be additional costs. But apart from the sort of financial value, you're looking at the knowledge value of things. And if you go to the wrong professional, irrespective of whatever the costs are, you're gonna pay twice. You're gonna potentially end up in a pit and have to get someone else dig you out, and that's gonna cost you in time and money.
Welcome, Simon. Sorry to throw you straight under the bus there. So it sounds like professional charges are a flipping nightmare. Are they?
Well, I think the biggest issue, to be honest, in the market at the moment is actually interest rates. I think it's about knowing to go to the right lender, because you know, you're saying if you go for the cheapest, it's not the best option. Okay, because people need to do more research and understand who their lender is. I mean, we're a specialist Mezz lender, and there aren't many in our field, and we're expensive because we're sort of the one little stage below equity and above senior. But I see many senior terms, and borrowers always go and say, well, I'm going to go to this lender because it's the cheapest. And what invariably happens is that the lender lets them down. They reduce the amount they're going to lend. They might tweak the pricing. They all of a sudden, someone in the background on the credit committee says, I don't like the risk. So it's really about understanding who you're dealing with, and particularly with interest rates with your lenders, because that's your biggest cost apart from the actual full build cost itself. So it's understand who you're dealing with, and do they actually have the money that they say they're going to put into this project? And that's where I see things falling foul in this market.
Chris, is this the sort of thing that drives you to the point of distraction?
I think it's really important, really salient point that you need to know and have a working relationship with your lender. I see many deals going south and that come across my desk where people have run out of money. And the norm is that people get overexcited about wanting to do the deal, that they don't realize, or they overlook the fact that you actually make your money when you buy at the front end, when you're buying the opportunity, when you're buying the site, when you're doing your negotiation at that front end. And the build costs are staggering in some of the larger projects, so they will dwarf. I mean, I've had deals come to me where we've been trying to broker the land to go in at a free, and it's actually, or zero cost rather, and it's actually a negative value because I can't get those back end GDVs on the units of what's being proposed to be built on that particular site. So yeah, fees are a massive factor. Huge factor, and you really do need to go into each project with your eyes wide open and be aware of where all the costs are. So,
Juliet, is it all their solicitors and barristers charging way too much money for what they do? Are people overcharging for their work?
You know, that is always the sort of the notion that solicitors charge too much. As soon as you pick up the phone to them, they're going to charge you, etc. I mean, that's not the way I work. And a lot of my colleagues don't work that way. But what we are saying is that if you choose the wrong solicitor for your transaction, you will potentially pay twice, because that solicitor is not going to understand the deal. So, for example, Simon's given the example of knowing your lender and working with your lender. If you've got a solicitor that doesn't understand the way that lender works or the lender's requirements, you will have a delay. You will have additional costs. You know, you might have to outsource some of the information, etc. So it will have a knock-on effect. So it's not fair to say that, yeah, you know, the brunt of the costs come from solicitors and barristers, etc. You know, there are professionals who are guilty of overcharging, and I admit that is the case. but it's for you as the consumer. You know, whichever professional we're talking about here, whether it's the lender, go on the lender's website, look at referrals, speak to other people that have used that lender. If it's a solicitor, again, go on their website, go on the Law Society's website and read up about them and how costs should be, etc. And solicitors will give you a terms of engagement letter. So they should explain to you how their fees are going to operate. You know, the sort of misconception of, well, these conveyor belt type firms, you go there, you pay £500 for your conveyancing, and that's it. That's what the norm is. You know, if you pay £500, you will get £500 worth of work, and you know there'll be a whole host of things that are awry and that are missing. So I do think, you know, there is a misconception that solicitors' fees are, or they overcharge, because I certainly try not to, and I try to be fair.
No, I know, Juliet, you are a fair lady through and through. However, Hamish, what else can we do to protect ourselves from the ravages of all these professional fees?
Well, I think the company we actually keep at this particular sort of moment in time, they're all rational souls. I mean, yes, Chris has admitted to having had his moments, haven't we all? But clearly the most important thing for everybody is, and I mean, Juliet sort of pointed it out and sort of said about the lender, what we want to try and do is create a partnership in terms of what we're doing. And if we're working with the right property lawyer, if we're working with the right solicitor, they will help guide us in the appropriate direction anyway. And they can actually indicate to us that we are with the right lender. What we are doing is right. And what we can do then, because the appropriate solicitor will know the lender, will know the developer. All of these people know each other if you're working within the right circle. And the important thing is to create the team, because it's the team that makes everything work. It's those as the multiple parts that we hear about, and Chris in particular, sort of so many moving parts here. We can't control all of them, but there are some major cogs in there. And if we can integrate and get the right cogs, and we're working with the right, it makes so much difference to the whole of the machinery that's operating.
Chris, it just seems like a nightmare. I mean, aren't you losing your mind all the time trying to spin all these blooming plates? You're going to navigate various different fees, and people potentially could let you down. I think I'll just stay home and put my feet under the duvet.
Yes, it's a nightmare. Don't get involved in it. You're making a rod for your own back.
No, it's not for me. But seriously, I mean, we put our hand. Look, we find our beautiful relationships. We always, Chris, you and I bang on about finding the right team. But once you've got that, can you just rely on it to get on, or do you have to keep monitoring it like a hawk?
To a point, yeah. It's a business like any other business. You need people around you who are capable, and you trust them to deliver. And each different team member brings something different to the table. So yeah, it's the property business. It's lots of your team, your core team, is not necessarily a team that's in-house, which is a big difference to most businesses. Lots of businesses do have their team in-house, and they pay their staff directly. Property is just slightly different, the way that it works, and like I said, there's lots of, the team have already said, lots of different moving parts in there. So it is plate spinning, and it's knowing which plates to be spinning and which ones are the high value activities as an investor, are the ones that you should be focused on, and which are the ones that you need your team to focus on.
Simon, I'm so glad you're here, because you are the person, or the team, if you like, that stands in the way between some of these deals actually going through.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, well, exactly. Does that mean you then price gouge to try and to take as much money out of the deal as you can because you're in that position to do so? I'm sure you can, of course.
To be perfectly honest, our pricing's very reasonable.
Okay.
Which I think you'll probably think is a sort of unrealistic thing to say. But let me give you an example. So 2 years ago, you go to a senior challenger bank and they would charge 6 over base rate. Base is 0.1, 6.1%, no problem. Now the average is probably 5 over base. maybe slightly more, depends on which lender you go to. So that's 10.25. 2 years ago, we were charging 18%. We're charging 18% now. We haven't put our prices up because we feel that that's a decent return for the risk. So actually, by what the senior is charging, we're cheap because we're taking a pseudo equity position. But the interesting thing, you talk about spinning plates, and this is actually something that's really important for us. Now, Mezz lending is very specialist, and it's not for every deal. It's not for every deal because there isn't enough margin in every deal which will have enough space for mezzanine in there, because you've got to get a return. And the last thing you want to do is you want to put a mezzanine piece in, and the developer is going to make a sub 10% return on cost. There isn't enough there to make sense. But the other important thing we need to look at experienced developers, but people who don't have too much on their plate at any one time. Because if you're spinning plates on one deal, but you've got 5 other deals going on at the same time, how have you got the focus? Because everything's against the developer at the moment. The build costs are too high, the interest rates are too high, the GDVs are down. And then you've got to rely on the fact that your contractor's not going to go bust. And then you've got to rely on the fact when you dig down into the ground, you're not going to find a main sewer that no one's picked up. And then you've got to rely on the fact that it's not going to pee with rain for the next 3 months and you can't do any groundworks. So you've got to be so focused because the margins are so small. Now, it's interesting that Chris said, you look at land now and that does have negative value. Yeah, absolutely. See it all the time. It's because the people selling the land are unrealistic for 2 reasons. 1, they're greedy, or 2, they're so highly leveraged because they bought it before, they can't afford to sell it anymore. So the only thing that Chris or any developer can possibly influence is the purchase price, but he can't influence it if the seller isn't going to change the price that they need to achieve or want to achieve. But I do want to say just one other thing. I've worked with Juliet for many years, and you can never accuse her of overcharging fees.
Oh no, I only pay the tongue in cheek.
Yeah. But we've worked with large firms, because sometimes you think you're going to work for a large firm. Boy, is that a mistake, because they don't care if they work for a lender and they think the borrower's paying the fees. They don't care. What is a £5,000 transaction becomes a £15,000 transaction. And then at the end, they say, well, we've actually gone over cost. Why have they gone over cost? Because they never really understood the transaction in the first place. And they're in a big sort of sausage factory that has to churn out and make lots of money.
Yes, I feel we're returning to a theme that we've hit on many times before. Factory conveyancing, factory property management, factory all the way through. I think it's amazing that this actually works at all in this day and age. So I'm going to throw it over to Hamish for the last word in all this. Hamish.
Well, Simon has sort of covered it sort of perfectly there, which is one of the reasons why we, as our particular sort of team, Search and Convey Solutions, we like working with independents because we don't take on too much. We aren't hard driven, and that's one of the great things you find when you speak with you. In fact, Simon I haven't met before, but he just emphasised this particular sort of point. You cannot work with too many operations going on at the same time, because you need to have direct control over what is happening. The team is critical. However, you really want value out of what you're doing. And the only way you're going to get value is by working with the right team. And you you will make the appropriate sums of money if you are guided in the right direction. So the monetary side, the big monies, of course, and this is where Simon sort of comes in. It is interesting meeting. Again, we find Simon is an expert on a particular type of lending. We need to speak to that particular type of lender if that's the type of project we've got. And it's just so obvious. Speak to the right person, they will give you value. You don't need to worry about the prices because you're speaking to a professional. But
So teamwork does in fact make the dream work.
Yeah.
Oh.
Everybody can curl their toes in disgust. Once again, I want to thank my esteemed team of Juliet Baboolal, Hamish, McLay, Chris Gilsenan. Today we were joined by Simon Pollins, the Mezz lender, and this has been Property Quorum. Thank you very much for coming. Remember, we're here every Thursday at around 10 o'clock to kick around property relevant topics of the day. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.